Welcome to Does the Team Think? With Cyril Fletcher, Tommy Trinder, Ted Ray, and the man who hatched up the idea, Professor Jimmy Edwards. And now, not very far away from me is the man who's going to put a question to you, and it is Mr. Edward Marsh. Hello, Mr. Marsh. Let's hear your question.
Could the team explain the correct procedure for mounting or dismounting a bicycle whilst wearing a kilt?
Could the team explain the correct procedure for mounting or dismounting a bicycle whilst wearing a kilt?
Well, in the first place, you don't need a spanner, you need a sporran. No. And in the second place, you must do it like the hedgehogs make love, very carefully.
I have this bicycle, and I also have a Fletcher kilt.
Tell me, have you got a pair of cycle clips you want to sell? You won't be using those.
They're no good for a kilt, no.
Oh, I know, so you want to sell them.
So I did this, you see, and I was rather keen, and over-keen, really, because I dashed at the bicycle, and the whole thing collapsed. And there I was, lying prostrate on my sporran. An old lady came along and accused me of running over a dog. It took me forever to explain to her that it was my sporran and not her dog.
All right, Professor.
Her dog had taken refuge on top of her hat.
There was that Scotsman sitting in a bus, wasn't there? And the lady thought the sporran was a dog and get off and eat biscuits. After about half an hour, he'd ate one of them.
I don't believe that the Scots could be so terribly, sort of idiotic, because they're a very canny race, the Scots. They're very intelligent people. They wouldn't be so idiotic as to
When
go...
are you playing Scotland? You're praising them up a bit, aren't you?
I'm no fool, Tommy.
He's had an injection of porridge.
Does it show? We'll make this a cereal. Now, anyway... These two fellows are riding the bicycles along in their kilts on the bikes, and one fellow comes to a little cottage, and he said, "Did you see the little cottage there? It says tartan tea 1 and 6. And the other fellow said, "Well, it can't be very good tea."
Professor Jimmy Edwards, would you like to tell us how you get on your bike?
I am not going to try and imitate the Scottish accent, attractive though I do find it in real Scotsman. The question about getting on a cycle with a kilt on is obviously simple. You buy a lady's bicycle, don't you? One of those where you hold your knees together and just glide onto it.
And then you sit on a soft haggis.
But Jimmy, if you were in a kilt and you couldn't hold your knees together, your sporran would get in the way.
No, well, there's ways of placing the sporran. Mr. Marsh, what are you afraid of? Why has this question got any point at all?
What I'd be afraid of getting on would be a cold saddle.
Oh, I see.
I do think there's one thing we should establish. A, is Mr. Marsh an Englishman? Or B, has he a Scottish bicycle? Or C, is he a Scotsman, and has he got an English bicycle?
Are you an Englishman or are you a
I
Scotsman?
must be
English.
Physic.
Do you have a bicycle?
Retired model, yeah.
Do you ever wear a kilt?
Retired?
Never, no.
Oh, this question is just a sort of fantasy that you've thought up.
Well, fantasy that. It's a good question.
All I can say to Mr. Marsh is that instead of wearing his sporran, if at any time the occasion arises, and he's got to ride a bicycle in a kilt, if you're afraid of a cold saddle, you take your sporran off and put it on the saddle first. And you'll get tickled to death, right in the middle of your performance.
I will tell you something, that this goes on even in all walks of life, because I know that one nun asked her sister nun, "Why do you always ride a bicycle in your nun's costume?" And she said, "I can't get out of the habit."
Thank you very much, team, and thank you, Mr. Marsh. I hope you always have a warm saddle. Thank you very much. And now, team, you're going to hear a question from Mrs. Jenny Price, who's now sitting next to me. Mrs. Price, have you got a question? Perhaps not about kilts, Scotsmen and saddles?
What are the team's favourite sounds and tastes?
Yes. What are the team's favourite sounds and tastes?
Well, I'll tell you something. Tastes are acquired. When I was a young man, sort of coming into show business and getting into a new way of life, and going to dinners and parties and things.
Ooh.
Anchovies.
Racy.
Olives. Anchovies, olives, oysters. Anathema.
How can you say what?
And I couldn't get the anathema down.
How can you say oysters in the same breath as anchovies? There's no relation between them at all.
Yeah, it does
Taste-
come
no,
from
no,
the sea.
It's the taste buds, you see. It's the taste buds. Olives, I think, well, how can you eat those things? And anchovies. And now, of course, I go around all day long looking for Olive. She's a lovely girl. Anchovies and oysters. You take me out to dinner,
rather
Jim.
a nice girl, too.
What's your favourite
Anchovy.
sound, Ted?
I'll tell you, my favourite sound
When it's
is
my
when
laughter,
I'm
it's
playing on a
cream.
golf course. and I hear the distant laughter of children in a playground. This is the hope of the world to me, really. I mean that.
The distant laughter of children in the playground because I'm entertaining them there. That's what it is.
Must be Jim's Academy for small children.
I think it's the distant laughter of children in the playground because they've seen Ted drive.
But I go back to my younger days when I used to do a little bit of rowing. And I'd like to say this rather romantic thing, if I may, Tommy, because Ted has set the pattern for this, the answer to this program, that favourite sounds and tastes are rather romantic. And I like the almost silent susurration of a skiff sliding serenely over seaweed.
Could you say that again? We've had a request. Could you possibly say that again?
The almost silent susurration of a skiff sliding serenely over seaweed.
Isn't that? But I'll tell you one thing, you can be sure the tide's out.
I would like to answer Mrs. Jenny Price's question very quickly, easily, and brilliantly, I think. She says, what are the team's favourite sounds and tastes? I don't mind the taste of drink, but I can't stand the sound of it.
Well, my favourite sound is the distant sound of somebody mowing the grass, Betty mowing the grass in the distance, and my favourite taste is Betty. That is the end of the Betty Astle show.
Mrs. Price, what is your favourite sound?
I like to hear my daughter asleep.
You
Hear her asleep?
Yes.
How do you
She
hear
got
it?
adenoids or something?
No, it's
annoys
the
me.
soft, gentle breathing she makes. That
Soft,
tells me
gentle
she's-
breathing.
and it tells me she's asleep.
How old is she, Mrs. Price?
7 months.
7 months. Oh,
Yeah.
beautiful.
How do you know she's beautiful? She's probably just a lump of pudding like they all
She's
are.
beautiful.
Every child at 7 months is a lump of pudding and she's beautiful.
What did you look like when you were 7 months
When I was 7 months,
It was pink and dimples, now he's drinking pimples, that's it.
well, I'll tell you it's a funny thing, Mac, you should say that. I was talking to Sybil the other day, we met in the passage, and I said, look, dear,
Have you both moved into the same house now?
No, that's the passage between the houses.
and you know, I said, you know, there was a marvellous photograph of me taken absolutely stark as when I was 8 months on a white bearskin rug. And she said, have you got it? I looked all through my desk and all my sort of, you know, things I keep, and it wasn't there. And she wants me to go and pose again.
I'd like to see a picture of a bearskin rug as well.
If we could get onto the tastes thing, we haven't done much about tastes. It's funny that you should bring up oysters, Ted, because they have oysters don't really taste, they sort of attack you.
But don't you, Jim, don't you find the crusts are so hard?
You have to open them first, Tom.
Oh, yes.
Really? You are such a peasant, honestly. I'm sitting next to this little Fletcher, the poet and the peasant.
Not only do you have to get them open, but you have to surprise them, don't you?
I can remember eating oysters in Spain once.
They're killers, they are.
As you squeezed the lemon on them, they screamed at you.
Well, being Spanish oysters, they wanted sherry, they didn't want lemon.
No, they were alive, you know. It's quite cruel, actually, eating oysters. They are actually living organisms, and the minute you put the lemon on them, it's like putting lemon up your nose or something.
Do you do that very often, put lemon up your nose?
Any more tastes? Any more sounds?
I'll tell you what, my wife wanted to take off some weight. And the doctor said, now look here, Mrs. Ray, he said, you know, calling her by her maiden name, Mrs. Ray. He said, well, now, he said, you've got to stop eating. You're eating too much. And the thing to stop you eating and give you strength is garlic. And it works as a diet. I give it to all you ladies free. In the first fortnight, she lost 15 pounds and 34 friends.
Mrs. Jenny Price, they may not be to your taste, but I hope they sounded all right. Thank you very much.
Would you like?
And now, team, you're going to have a question from a lady all in blue, Mrs. Gillian Dunn. Hello, Mrs. Dunn. Question, please.
Does the team think that with the wide coverage now on television of world and home affairs, newspapers are really necessary?
Does the team think that with the wide coverage now on television of world and home affairs, that newspapers are really necessary?
Well, of course they are. How else would we eat our chips? You can't eat your chips out of a television set.
I think that the newspapers are very essential. Joking apart, I mean, for example, I put them on the floor when I clean my boots and that sort of thing. They're very useful for that. But you see, you get more comment and you can digest and think about the comment more carefully than you can when you hear it and see it on television. It comes at you on television and it's through your nut and gone out before you can do anything about it. But you can sit down quietly over a cup of tea in the morning and digest what is written in the newspapers, and for that, I think they're absolutely essential.
But the strange thing is that when one reads something in the paper, this can always be taken as being authentic, in as much as if you say to your friends, oh, the Dutch have captured Holland. I heard it on television, and they say, I don't believe it. But if you say, I read it in the paper, here it is, look.
Yeah. Wait a minute, who had Holland before the Dutch? I question that remark. The Dutch have captured Holland?
It's taken you all this time to get that gag. I'm too subtle for this programme.
No, I hate to remind you, Ray, but the Spaniards had it for a time. I would greatly miss newspapers, especially Sunday newspapers, because I would greatly miss those black hands that one gets on Sunday mornings.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, I would miss the Sunday newspapers very much because I'd have to take down that rusty nail in a small room.
If you read the superior Sunday
It's there somewhere, work it out.
I'll say this if it kills me. If you read the superior Sunday newspapers, you will know that all the print comes off on your hands.
Well, then, if what Ted says is true, it's not only black hands that you get.
I
think this question is too serious for this game.
We're having fun.
Let's find out from Mrs. Dunn whether she was really serious in putting this question and what her views are about her own question.
Yes, I was serious, but yes, I think they are necessary because the television, you have to take the news when it's presented. With the newspaper, you can just pick it up at your convenience.
That actually is the best place to read them in.
I always take them into the reading room. But you know, now that's a funny thing. The time that they've hit upon to have these newsreels, these news things on television, one of them is at 10 to 6 and one of them is at 5 to 6, and I think this is because everybody's trying to get them in before 6. Because it used to be at 6. It'll end up at 5:30 when the kids are still in bed, out of bed, or whatever the hell. Why do they have the programs at such funny times?
That's another question, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, Team, what do you dislike about newspapers?
I don't dislike anything about newspapers.
No, they're marvellous. They do a wonderful job.
I'll say this. I think Tom did mention it earlier. I'm not quite sure, but as far as we're concerned in our business, we rely. Our reputations are made or broken in the press. And the show that I'm in at the moment was absolutely made by the critics. The day that we opened on a Monday, which is unusual. On the Tuesday, we had £40 in the kitty in the morning. By the time the people had read the press reports, we had £400 in the evening because all the critics liked it.
In the kitty? Fancy putting £400 in a poor cat.
We like the papers when they're nice to us. I love all my nice press cuttings.
Yes,
the
true.
bad ones I throw away, of course.
Never ask a newspaper for a retraction.
That's true.
Because the late General Freiberg, a newspaper wanted to print once that General Freiberg, the battle-scarred hero, and they put in General Freiberg, the battle-scared hero. So he asked for a retraction, and next day they printed what read General Freiberg, the battle-scared hero, should have read General Freiberg, the bottle-scarred hero.
Thank you, team, very much, and thank you very much, Mrs. Gillian Dunn. And it seems to me that all 4 members of the panel are in favour of newspapers. And that takes us now to the time when we meet our special guest, one of Britain's top recording artists, and now a stage and film star too. We're delighted to welcome Cilla Black. Welcome to the programme. And I hope somewhere during this programme you'll give me the opportunity of listening again to that beautiful little exclamation mark of a laugh of yours. But that comes later. Let's have your question first.
Well, I've got on a bit of paper down here.
You have.
So I can read it all out properly.
Good.
And I want to know that if the team were invited to cut a disc, what kind of song would they...
Wait a minute.
Listen to me.
Quite right.
This is my party piece. What kind of song would each member of the team choose, and also what kind of backing?
If each member of the team were invited to cut a disc, what kind of song would each member of the team choose and what kind of backing?
How can you put a backing on the inside of a wax cylinder?
No, it's true. When Ted went to make his latest recording, the recording manager...
I deny this.
Yes, Mr. Edison...
I deny it.
Said you're going to make a long-played record.
Mr. Edison.
And it was on a cylinder and it lasted a half a second.
It's just like South America, 78 revolutions a minute.
Oh, yes, I like that.
Cilla would have no problem getting on a bicycle because she's wearing spotted trousers.
She's not getting on a bicycle, she's revolutioning on a record.
Do you know he looks the image of my dad?
Me? Who
Which
does?
one? Say which one?
Ted.
With Ted Ray.
Ted, yeah.
Honestly?
What made you change your name from black to white?
Well, Ted
Well,
Ray
I
comes
must
from
say,
Liverpool
darling,
anyway.
no wonder you're so attractive if you have a handsome father.
Obviously,
love
Ted
that.
Ray had a bicycle and a kilt.
But Cilla, surely your father's not a midget as well?
Oh, he's not.
midget?
Actually, I'm taller than him, my dad.
Yes, I'm a
He's the
tall
same
boy.
size, he looks the same colour in all red face, and his hair's the same
Very
as
You can go off people, red-faced.
Just a minute, Cilla,
Well,
you
she's
said...
admitted her father's a boozer like you.
He does, he likes his pint.
I said...
I certainly do, and anybody else's I can get hold of.
You said, Cilla, his face was red and his what was the same?
Oh, his hair.
It's her.
Yes.
Oh,
You mean his wife?
What's his
this is a delightful
It's
thing about
her.
Cilla
It's
Black.
her.
Cilla Black, entirely uninhibited, the same sweet kid that came from Liverpool and went so far, so successfully, and justifiably so. And she's never tried to talk posh like what we have.
No.
She's never tried. You've tried and
But
failed.
Cilla, I'll give you a secret. He is not from Liverpool. Wigan. That's where Ted
I
Ray
know,
comes
I
from.
was born in Wigan, but as soon as I could walk, I went to Liverpool.
Just because your mother was too lazy to carry you there.
My mother wasn't even there, the neighbours had me.
I think we
Well,
all...
why did you go to Liverpool?
Why did I go? Because it's the greatest swinginest city in the world outside of London.
I'm going to
And
say
that
this...
comes from an Arsenal supporter.
I'm going to say
Don't
this
speak
again.
ill of the dead.
I'm going to say this again. You'll notice that all the people who speak most proudly of Liverpool have already left it.
About this record I'm
Yes,
going to make.
Yes, this record.
I would like to make what they call a protest song. I'm not quite sure what protest songs are, but I've read about them. And I want this to be a protest song with a brass band as backing. I want 180 players backing me up with bassoons, not bassoons, euphonia.
180 players. Well, I suggest 179 harps and a bassoon.
No, I'm
Do
going
you
to
know,
have...
Not a
I
brass
think
instrument.
you're all talking, I'm sure you're all talking, and you're being sort of being funny about it, but I agree. I think if people want to put 140 harps on a record, I think it's great.
How
And
did
I'd
you get
like
them on?
Pardon? Well,
140 harps on one little record.
Well, she's
I
highly
mean in
strung.
the studio.
Actually,
I think
100
after all, this is what the Beatles do. They do all ridiculous things.
Beatles haven't
They
got
do,
harps.
they do. I've been reading about them. Like having funny coloured cars. They're mad.
No,
you
but-
like me, have a black Rolls Royce, make a fortune doing weddings and funerals.
And he's let the boot unfurnished.
Haven't got boots. I've got a pair of mink slippers on mine.
Your
may
car,
interest-
he's boasting
it may-
about a Rolls Royce. It's so old, he's got the only boot that does up with laces.
Buttons and a button hook.
It may interest Miss Black to know that I have made several records. I have never been top of the hit parade, but my records do have a certain interest, a sort of collector's interest now. They are museum pieces. They're often played in Australia. I don't know why.
Well, they used to
but
send convicts out there.
I get these checks from Australia.
Like you come from
played
Czechoslovakia, don't they?
It's a very low part of Australia called Botany Bay. Botany Bay.
I think the sort is called West Australian Bush, it says on the return. Played 3 times, 6 and 9pence. Well, it's marvellous.
I would like
nice,
to...
yeah.
Thrilling to get this from the West Australian Bush.
Could I
to
ask-
think that my voice is heard out there without any interruptions from the team.
What is a protest song? That's what I want to know.
But you
Well,
brought
it's
it up.
what you're doing all the time on the panel. You're protesting to everybody who asks you a question.
I'm not protesting, I'm just shouting my head off.
Yes,
here.
you are. You call that poor woman's baby before a 7-month-old pudding.
Team, let's just find out, because you might be able to take some advice from Cilla. Cilla, I'm sure you've thought about this. What sort of song or protest song would you think these gentlemen of the team could sing? Even if it's not protest, doesn't matter.
Oh, well, I think Jimmy should sing and play the type of music that goes... I think he should play in a drunken stupor for a start.
The what? Play the what?
No, I think you should sing a song about a sea shanty or something about drink. Because you're always going on about it, aren't you, Jimmy?
Cilla, what about Ted Ray?
I don't
The
know.
man who looks like your dad,
Actually,
be careful, love.
Yes. I think I've never heard him sing.
If he's like your dad, he ought to sing a song called I'm Forever Blowing Doubles.
Oh, yes, that's quite
You've
good.
never heard me sing, Cilla.
No,
I
I've
do
never
sing
heard you
rather
sing.
nice. I'm a bathroom singer, really. We have to. There's no lock on the
So
door.
am I. Listen, I am too.
You sing in your bath.
I
Cilla.
always do. I always sing
Is that
in
where
the
you make the
loo.
records?
Pardon?
How can you get all those recording engineers stuck into the bathroom?
I'd like to, actually. In fact, I think the best sounds come from the loo, really.
Oh,
No, I mean, it's all lovely and echoey, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yes.
That's what
In
I
the
meant.
echo chamber.
Ted, that joke will be panned wherever it's heard.
Well, I'll tell you something, Cilla. We all envy any people who get into the top 10. It's no good saying we don't. We look for the easy way. We have to work very hard, we comics, to get our laughs. We have to go out and appear at places. And if you make a record, you know, it's a marvellous thing.
Well, the one that I made had I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles on the front side, and Why Did I Kiss That Girl on the... Is that your real name, Cilla Black?
No, my real name is Priscilla White.
Your name was White and you changed it to Black. This is
Oh,
something...
that was a mistake. You know, you were talking about papers before, right?
Yeah.
Well, there was a local paper in Liverpool. They knew my name was Cilla, but they didn't know. They knew it was a colour of some sort, and they knew it was either black or white, so they took it black.
Is that true?
They did. So,
Is that true?
Yes, and when I read the paper, I was so mad, and so was my father.
Because you look like
then,
me.
So you
So
decided
the
to stick to
paper
it.
wasn't read.
No, that...
Thank you, team. Thank you. And wishing Cilla Black all the luck in the future. Thank you, Cilla, for being one of the most delightful guests we've ever had. Thank you very
I'm
much
most
indeed.
confused. I'm ever so confused.
Well, that's it. Thank you very much, Cilla. Thank you. And now, team, we're going to welcome Mr. Edward Rhodes. Hello, Mr. Rhodes. Can we have your question, please?
What particular habit does the team hate?
What particular habits does the team hate?
Well, of course. The strange thing about this is, my wife said to me some time ago, if you don't stop doing that, she said, I'm going to leave you. Well, I must have stopped her because it's 20 years ago and she's still there. I wish I knew what it was. I'm worried.
But, Mr. Rhodes, we only see the bad habits in others, don't we, really? I mean, we don't know our own particular habit. My wife's got a terrible bad habit, and I can't break her of it. She's always saying, can I have some money?
There are a great many things that other people do that I don't like, Mr. Rhodes. For example, take just simply the realm of driving. As a motorist, I dislike the habit that people have of going into the right-hand lane in order to turn right at some lights, but not flashing the indicator. So you come up behind them and think, well, we're all right here. And as soon as the lights go green, they start flashing the indicator, and you're stuck there for another 5 minutes. Another thing, take the realm of the telephone. People who pick up the telephone and say hello.
What do you want them to say, goodbye?
Have you ever had the sort of conversation on the telephone that I've had recently where you dial a number and a voice at the other end says hello? So because they haven't announced their identity, I say, well, hello. And they say hello. And I say hello. And they say, who are you? And I say, never mind who I am. Who are you?
Who said we got no script writers in this country?
And this is costing money. Their duty is to say, this is, whatever the number is, London Wall 7297.
But they don't say that anymore. All these numbers. Now, why did we go in for these numbers?
It's a
we were
digi-
perfectly happy.
It's a digital
We were
society.
perfectly happy. The lovely sort of words and the sound. This is Tull 4569. And now you've got to say 889164. Who can remember
Well,
that?
it's because it's a
Ted,
digital society.
that poses another question. Can we stick
No, it's just one of the bad habits that we're developing.
I'm
That's what
talking
we're trying
about bad
to get
habits.
at.
Because
Dieting, I think, is a bad habit. I'm sick and tired of it.
I hate when I ride on the tandem, my wife takes the lead. She's watching the country, and everything I see is so familiar.
Mr. Rhodes, what are the things about life that you hate, or the habits that you hate most?
Talking of bad habits,
Mr.
I'm
Rhodes.
optimist.
Mr. Rhodes.
Oh,
Are there
yes,
any other
I haven't
habits?
said anything yet.
Hang on, you will.
I think my...
I'd love to say something. I've got
Say
something
goodbye.
very funny to say.
In a minute, sir.
It's a scream. I bet it's funnier than Mr. Rhodes's.
And what's more, you're getting more money than Mr. Rhodes.
Mr. Rhodes, please.
Mr. Rhodes is looking like a very crossroads at the moment.
Mr. Rhodes is getting the biggest plug that anyone's ever had on this programme.
I don't think he's Mr. Rhodes. I think he's Major Road Ahead.
If
Well,
his
I'm
name
afraid-
was Cecil, we could ask him some advice.
I'm afraid, gentlemen, is that I can't stand smoking, you see.
Well, why don't you
Well,
sit
sit
down?
down.
The photo finish.
You're as bigoted as I am about smoking. Hooray, Mr. Rhodes, we see eye to eye on this. I'm utterly against all sorts of fumigation or whatever you like to
You've
call
just
it.
had one of my best cigars.
I know, but I'm a non-smoker at heart.
Cyril Fletcher, say something funny.
Well, this is what I was going to say. I was going to say
Oh, that's
something-
great.
I do love it.
One of the most irritating habits is this habit of putting the little finger in the ear. And
I always put my thumb in.
a friend of mine was in a barber's having a
You hear some
short
wonderful programs that way, though.
having a short back and sides in this barber's, and he suddenly looked on the floor and saw an ear on the floor. And he said to the barber, "What's this ear, you see?" And the barber said, "I don't know." He said, "Whose is it?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "Put your finger in it. If it feels good, it's yours."
Thank you, team, very much, and thank you, Mr. Edward Rhodes. Thank you very much indeed for coming. And now, team, you're going to hear a question from Mrs. Myra Mayer. What's your question, please?
Are members of the team able to recall their first conception of heaven?
Wow. Are members of the team able to recall their first conception of heaven?
Yes, it was in a song, My Blue Heaven. I always thought it was blue. When I was
Well,
a
I
little
still
boy.
think it is. My conception of heaven is that it is blue. It's changed during my life. When I was a tiny little boy, my first conception of heaven was getting sick on strawberries and ice cream. When I was 15, my conception of heaven was when I kissed Mabel Griffiths and I thought the top of my head was coming off.
You better stop at that, Ted. This is being broadcast.
And then, of course, nowadays, when I play golf, as you all know, I play golf, I play at it. I'm a reasonably good golfer. If I can break 80 on a lovely spring day and come into the 19th
I'm
hole,
the same with bottles of beer. If I can break 80 on the same day, that is going to be a heavenly evening. But we're talking about our early conception of heaven. My impression of heaven that I retained from my childhood days was that it was a sort of euphoric place. It was a boundless place, full of people for some reason all dressed in white.
We've had the opinions of all four members of the team, so may we have yours, Mrs. Mayer?
Well, my first idea was a sort of angelic canteen place, very tall and glazed and long, and there were tiny tables and a reception desk, and you sat at your table, and you had a glass of milk and a sticky bun, and you sat and waited.
I'm not going there. I'm opting out of that. A glass of milk, did she say?
Sticky bun.
and a sticky bun.
A sticky bun.
And
no
you can
doubt-
talk about current affairs.
Mrs. Mayer, you've just given us your opinion of what you thought heaven was like in your earlier days. What would be your idea of heaven now?
Lots and lots of quiet and birds, trees, fish, you know.
You can get that
streams.
without dying.
The Luton Girls Choir, that's not heaven.
I believe, you know, that this is only a transitory period. I think that when you die, you go away and you come back on Earth in some other form.
Yeah.
Like a sticky bun.
Now, I'd like to come back as a donkey.
You will.
No, you can't come back as the same thing twice.
Let's talk about what the lady really means. So you pass away, you reach the age, you're 108, and you're carried off the stage into your dressing room having had... and they say it's no good, and they cross your hands over you and close the eyes, and you're wafted up, and there are the golden gates, and there's St. Peter. And he opens them up and he says, "Jim, what kept you? The bottle's open."
And there, I'm afraid, we must close. Does the team think for today? On behalf of Cyril Fletcher, Tommy Trindon, Ted Graham, Professor Jimmy Edwards, our thanks to all our questioners, and particularly to our special guest, Cilla Black. And if you'd like to ask the team a question, let's hear from you. And we hope you'll all join us again next week. Till then, this is MacDonald Hobley saying goodbye to you all. Goodbye.